The Germans thought they understood the battlefield. By 1944, they had fought across Europe, North Africa, and the Eastern Front. They had seen every kind of weapon the Allies could throw at them. Tanks rolling forward in tight formations. Artillery pounding positions from miles away, bombers darkening the sky. In their minds, war followed patterns. You learned the ranges. You learned the limits. And once you believed you were outside those limits, you felt safe enough to breathe again. That confidence was about to be shattered. Somewhere behind American lines sat a weapon the Germans barely considered a threat on the ground. The American 90mm anti-aircraft gun. To them, this was a sky weapon. A defensive tool meant to reach up, not out. It was designed to track fast-moving aircraft, calculate lead, altitude, and speed, and punch steel shells into the air with brutal precision. It wasn't supposed to be aimed horizontally. It wasn't supposed to duel with tanks or hit ground targets from extreme distances. But war has a way of breaking rules. American crews knew exactly what they had. The 90mm gun was powerful, accurate, and capable of incredible muzzle velocity. On paper, it was already impressive. In reality, in the hands of trained crews, it was terrifying. And on this day, someone made a decision that would catch the enemy completely off guard. If it could hit a plane at altitude, why couldn't it hit a target on the ground? Far, far away? The Germans didn't hear the warning signs. No incoming artillery whistle. No tanks advancing through the trees. No aircraft overhead. Just a distant thunderclap, deeper than most guns, followed by a moment of silence that felt wrong. Then the impact. At nearly 3,000 yards away, German positions that should have been untouchable were suddenly under fire. This wasn't random shelling. The rounds landed with purpose. With intent. The kind of accuracy that forces soldiers to pause and ask the one question no one wants to ask in combat. What is hitting us? Quote. From the American side, this wasn't chaos. It was methodical. Crews adjusted elevation and traverse, calculating distance with calm efficiency. These men were trained to hit aircraft moving hundreds of miles per hour. So a stationary or slow-moving ground target felt almost unfair. Each round fired was a test, and each impact confirmed the same shocking truth. The gun was performing beyond expectations. The Germans had planned for everything except this. Their defensive thinking was built around known threats. Anti-tank guns had ranges. Artillery had limits. If you stayed far enough back, you could regroup, reposition, or prepare a counterattack. But the 90mm gun erased that invisible safety line. It reached out farther than most ground weapons on the field. And it did so with a precision that felt unnatural. Confusion spread first. Officers struggled to identify the source of fire. Spotters scanned the horizon, looking for artillery flashes that weren't there. Tank crews hesitated, unsure whether to advance or pull back. Every second spent guessing was another second the Americans used to dial in their shots. And this is the moment where the battlefield truly changed. Not because of the number of shells fired, but because of what the Germans realized. They weren't being attacked by something new. They were being attacked by something familiar, used in a way they never prepared for. That realization hits harder than any explosion. It tells you your assumptions are wrong. And once your assumptions collapse, everything else follows. The 90mm gun wasn't just firing steel. It was firing doubt. Doubt in defensive doctrine. Doubt in distance. Doubt in safety. From that point on, German soldiers could no longer trust range as protection. Positions once considered secure became liabilities. Open ground felt exposed. Even pulling back didn't guarantee survival. The psychological impact set in fast, because fear multiplies when you don't understand the threat. And all of this came from a weapon that was never meant to fight this way. That's what makes this moment so powerful. It wasn't technological superiority alone. It was adaptability. The willingness to look at a tool and ask, what else can this do? The Americans didn't just bring firepower. They brought flexibility. And against an enemy that relied heavily on rigid planning, that flexibility was devastating. By the time the Germans began to understand what they were facing, the damage was already done. Positions were disrupted. Confidence was shaken. Momentum was lost. The 90mm gun had proven its point in the most brutal way possible. The battlefield belongs to those who can think beyond the rulebook. And this was only the beginning of what happened when distance stopped being a guarantee of survival. At first, the Germans tried to explain it away. That's what soldiers do when reality doesn't match training. Maybe it was a lucky artillery shot. Maybe a hidden battery had crept closer than expected. Maybe the maps were wrong. Anything was easier to accept than the truth. That the battlefield itself had shifted beneath their feet. Because distance had always meant something in war. Distance meant time to react. Distance meant room to maneuver. Distance meant safety. But as more shells slammed into positions thought to be untouchable, that belief started to collapse. Vehicles burned where they stood. Earthworks that should have provided cover were torn open. And still, no clear source of fire could be identified. The rounds were coming from so far away that it felt almost unreal. Like being punished by something you couldn't see, hear, or fight back against. That's when panic quietly entered the picture. Not the kind of panic you see in movies. Screaming, chaos, soldiers running blindly. This was worse. This was controlled fear. The kind that sits in your chest and drains confidence with every passing second. Commanders had to make decisions without understanding the threat. Do you advance toward an enemy you can't locate? Do you pull back and risk exposing yourself even more? Every option suddenly felt wrong. The psychological damage spread faster than the physical destruction. Once soldiers realize that range no longer protects them, the battlefield becomes hostile in every direction. The ground doesn't feel solid. The horizon doesn't feel distant. Even standing still feels dangerous. And when fear reaches that level, efficiency dies. Orders slow. Reactions hesitate. Small mistakes multiply into deadly ones. From the American side, the effect was unmistakable. Each accurate hit reinforced the same brutal message. The enemy had nowhere truly safe to stand. The 90mm gun wasn't just eliminating targets. It was controlling behavior. German units began to reposition unnecessarily. Breaking formations, abandoning strong points they might have otherwise held. Movement became reactive instead of strategic. That shift is everything in combat. When an army reacts instead of acts, it loses control of the fight. German doctrine emphasized preparation, structure, and calculated responses. But this weapon disrupted all of it. The battlefield no longer followed expected rules. And once those rules vanished, even experienced troops struggled to adapt. The gun didn't just outrange them. It outpaced their thinking. Reports began to circulate. Whispers among troops. Stories of being hit from absurd distances. Of positions collapsing without warning. Whether every detail was accurate didn't matter. Fear doesn't need facts. It needs patterns. And the pattern was clear enough. You could be killed from farther away than you ever trained to expect. That kind of realization sticks. It changes how you move, how you take cover, how you trust your commanders. Even when the firing stopped, the pressure didn't. Soldiers stayed tense, waiting for another invisible strike. Every distant boom sounded closer than it should have. Every open stretch of ground felt exposed. The gun had done its job even in silence. And here's the deeper impact that often gets overlooked. When one side proves that range no longer defines safety, it forces the other side to rethink everything. Tactics, positioning, even morale. Resources have to be diverted to counter a threat that shouldn't exist. Plans slow down. Momentum fades. That's how battles are lost. Not always through overwhelming force, but through the erosion of confidence. The American 90mm gun didn't need to fire endlessly to win this psychological war. It only needed to prove its reach once. After that, every German decision carried doubt. Every move felt like a gamble. And in war, hesitation is often deadlier than firepower. What started as a clever repurposing of an anti-aircraft weapon became a lesson written in steel. And fear. Modern battlefields don't forgive rigid thinking. The side that adapts faster controls not just the terrain, but the enemy's mind. By the time German commanders fully understood what had happened, the damage was already permanent. The illusion of distance as protection was gone. And once that illusion disappears, it never truly comes back. Because from that moment forward, every step they took carried the same haunting question. How far can the enemy really reach?